Michael Crow, costume designer for Hawkeye. You were the assistant costume designer on several Marvel movies, and then the costume designer on The Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So when did you get the call to work on Hawkeye?
Towards the end of Falcon and Winter Soldier, we started discussing Hawkeye. Of course, that was right before the shutdown and the pandemic hit. So that put everything on hold for a bit. And then about 3 months into the shutdown, I got the call that we were starting on Hawkeye. We still had about 5 weeks of shooting left to do on Falcon and Winter Soldier while we were prepping Hawkeye.
So what did you know about Hawkeye at that point? Like, were you told, like, it's going to be set at Christmas time and, Kate Bishop will be introduced and everything?
Yes, I mean, I knew that the setting in New York, I knew it was Christmas. I knew loosely it was based on the Matt Fraction run on Hawkeye, which I immediately went out and bought and read. It was amazing. It's such a fun run of that character.
Oh yeah, for sure. Well, the Ronin suit is an important plot point of the series, and we first saw that in Endgame. So I guess how involved were you in the design of the Ronin suit for Endgame? And then for Hawkeye, what kind of adjustments, if at all, did you have to make for the suit? Because it has to fit Clint and Kate, who wears it at one point, and also Grills, who wears it at one point.
As far as the end game question, I was definitely involved in the process. Juliana Makowski, the costume designer of Avengers Endgame and Infinity War, definitely allowed me to have some input as far as collaborating with that costume. And it was one of those costumes in Endgame that we started very early and it didn't shoot until a little later. So it went through a lot of iterations. There was a lot of development that went into that costume. And then as far as changes we made, we did try the original costume on Hailee at one point. I originally said we're going to have to make costumes for everybody because this costume is not going to fit Hailee and girls, and it's not going to fit everybody. And I got a little pushback, and I said, okay, well, we'll try it, and we did. And of course, it didn't fit very well and didn't look great. So we did end up making a version of Ronin for Kate. Grills, we wanted it not to fit very well. So we actually, he's much taller than Jeremy. And so it was a little short, but we actually ended up taking it in to make it even smaller on him than it was in reality. But we did use the original. Yeah. Because he's tall, but he's very slim.
Mm-hmm. I just love watching each of them wear throughout the show, because it's like the sisterhood of the traveling suit. It's everyone. There are so many amazing costumes on the show, but especially for ones straight out of the comics, how do you go about finding the balance of honoring the look of the comics for the comic fans who can immediately be like, oh my god, it's just from the comics, while also putting your own spin on it and making it your own and kind of update it as well?
There are a lot of iterations of all of the superhero costumes that come out of the meetings with the whole group. And there's a lot of input that goes into what works, what doesn't, with the concept team at Marvel, and what's practical and what's not. And then in the end, we try to stay true to the comics as possible, because I think that's what everybody wants. We want to see what's on the page come to life as closely as possible. And as far as like my own sort of creative input, like that comes in like styling it for the particular actor and the proportions, and it's the challenge of making a superhero costume come to life.
Yeah, I think this show, or maybe even this Marvel property, has some of the most comfortable looking costumes between like the tracksuit mafia and just like the long coats and everything. But also Clint and Kate's Hawkeye costumes at the end, the purple and black look.
Mhm.
Well, I love that, obviously he puts it on and she's like, oh, you're wearing it. And it's like, oh, that's the moment they become partners finally,
Yeah.
and he accepts it. But he has a line later on that he's like, oh, like the elasticity, it's like, it's so comfortable and it looks like functional, and like you can actually fight in it and it's not tight unlike some other superhero looking costumes. So what was your approach to those costumes for the two of them?
I used a lot of sportswear as inspiration as far as construction. Um, uh, Kate's was a little more straightforward. We used a lot of the techniques that we've used on other superhero costumes in the past. Hailee might have something to say about the comfort of that shoulder armor that was on that costume, but because that's a little tricky. And I know it sort of dug into her shoulder a little bit, but and getting into Jeremy's costume was not exactly easy, because it looks like a t-shirt. It looks like you pull it over your head, except we can't. So we had to hide zippers in places, and he sort of had to crawl into it and be zipped in. It was important to me when we were developing Jeremy's costume specifically, that because it's in the comic books, it's a t-shirt with a print on it. And early on, we talked about simply doing that for him. But I brought up the point that we need to hide harnesses, and he's got to have something to hold the quiver on, because there's nothing there to hold it on. Something's got to be under that t-shirt. So there's a lot of stuff that we have to hide under a t-shirt, that they can fix in post if that's how they want to go. But I said that it would be nice if we did something. Maybe it's a little neoprene. Maybe it's something a little higher tech than a t-shirt, that'll allow us to hide some of that gear that we need for filming.
Yeah, it did feel pretty sporty, kind of like some like Under Armour workout thing, that you would wear.
Yeah.
And in the same vein, like the tracksuits, they look so comfortable. So what was your approach to that? Like, were they all custom made, all those suits, the jackets and stuff?
Yep, they were all custom made. We toyed with the idea of like trying to make a deal with an athletic company to use tracksuits, but in the end, we wanted something that was just kind of neutral and a blank slate that people don't necessarily have a relationship with in real life. And I kind of wanted it to feel like a throwback, as far as like the material and the feel. I wanted it to have a little bit of like a 70s retro kind of vibe. And we also talked about early in the scripts, we talked about there being sort of a ranking system with the stripes on the tracksuits. And we did follow through with that design wise. I don't know if it really reads in the show, and all of the references to it, I think got
I think you
out.
could see like pinpoint like the leader of gang. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. We singled out Ivan because, or Ivan, because in the comic books, he has a different color tracksuit than everybody else.
I imagine those were probably the easiest fittings.
Yes and no, because trying to make each of them seem individual and not being repetitive was the hard part of that, because they're all basically wearing the same thing. And some of the actors were very surprised when they showed up because I reached out to them because I needed their sizes so that we could make a tracksuit in an appropriate size. So they were expecting these like crazy custom costumes, superhero show, right? And they show up and they're like, oh, it's tracksuit and t-shirts.
Were they jealous of the LARPers? Because those were some wacky costumes.
Yeah, I mean, the LARPers got to have a lot of fun. And their costumes were pretty ridiculous.
Mm-hmm. How did you go about making those? Like, because they have to look homemade as well. And I love the one that Jeremy puts on with like the makeshift shield because it's like flopping when he's going through the crowd.
Uh-huh. Well, a lot of in episode 2, a lot of the LARPer costumes were rentals that we cobbled together for the first scene. And then for episode 6, when they get brand new costumes and they're homemade, but homemade by the same person that made Kate and Clint's costumes. So we could dial them up a little bit. And we had a manufacturer in Georgia help with those and make those. She does a lot of custom leather work. And
mm-hmm. Have you ever gone LARPing yourself?
I have not gone LARPing, no.
You've never pretended to be a Viking and faked your own death.
Oh.
Well, the other costumes I really love were for Rogers the musical.
Mm-hmm.
The concept itself of the musical is amazing, but those costumes obviously are riffs on the real Avengers. So how did you go about designing those?
It was a long process. When we was in the first versions of the script, there was mention of the musical, but we never saw it. And then somewhere along the way, he started going to see the musical, and my brain exploded because it was like, okay, you have what, 7, 8 Avengers plus Loki plus aliens. And I was like, oh,
and they added Ant-Man, who wasn't even there. So.
Yeah. I'm like, where are we getting the money for this? Who's making it? My brain exploded. It ended up being at the end of our shooting schedule, so we had a long time to develop ideas, which was good because we went through a lot of different iterations. We started we wanted, there was a desire to have it be sort of accurate and have it be, superhero costumes. We talked about using the real costumes. Then we decided that was a little too on the nose, and why would they have the real costumes? And then we looked at possibly making a version of the costumes that was a little more like theatrical. Maybe it's glitzy, maybe it's sparkly. Who knows? So we did a version of that, and that was a little too far in the Broadway silly direction. So then we talked about, okay, what are the defining aspects of each character that we absolutely need, but it's not going to take it to like a cosplay level. We were trying to make it its own thing. And how do you do that in a way that feels original and authentic? And we looked at a lot of different Broadway productions of shows that are sort of pared down and how they did it, and use that as reference to start that creative process. And in the end, it was a lot of fun. Those 2 or 3 days on set were spectacular.
It looked like a lot of fun, and also they have to be able to dance in it too. So again,
I mean, there was that too. And when I finally presented the designs, there was some like, is it far enough? Is it funny enough? Is it? We're not sure. It wasn't until it all came together with sets and in the theater that I was like, oh my god, it works. Like somehow. It's just. But there was definitely trying to think what the word, but when we were talking about how to make the costumes functional, and we needed to be able to dance in them, we needed to be able to jump around and not have to edit out, they can't do the backflip, or they can't do the, whatever they needed to do. We had to make it work.
Sure. Well, one of the big surprises towards the end of the series is the return of Kingpin, Vincent D'Onofrio. And I know you didn't find out until, I guess, halfway through the shoot that it was Kingpin.
Oh, yeah.
So what was in the script, and I guess how do you just not even think about designing whoever this like shadowy figure is gonna be coming at the end until like you get the word?
Well, originally in the scripts, it sort of read like in the comics. There's sort of this sort of frail old man with an oxygen mask, and that's sort of what was in the original script. And we weren't shooting it until like we started shooting in December, and we weren't shooting it till the end of January. So at some point, like over the holidays, I reached out to Trent Tran, who is one of our producers, and just sort of asked. I said, so we haven't really talked about this character. Do you want what's in the comic book? Is that what we need to do? Because that's a custom thing. Who's the cast member? Like, we need to start moving on this. And I just got a little text back saying, we'll talk about it later, but that's not really what it is. And then a couple of days later, I got a call, and she whispered, she was like, this is what we're doing. Nobody knows, you can't tell anybody. So even for like a month after that, I couldn't talk to vendors. I couldn't, like, nothing, because Vincent wasn't signed. It was very secret.
Wow, were you just the first person she told? Like,
I think maybe outside of the
higher ups, like
the higher
Kevin.
up, yeah. I think maybe, because eventually, like, I started talking to Dennis, who was our makeup department head, about how we were going to approach it and so forth.
Well,
and so
I love that you guys pulled from the comic book of the Hawaiian shirt and the white suit, which is also different from his look in Daredevil. So how did that come about?
It came like from Kevin and Vincent. They definitely wanted to bring down Kingpin a couple of notches, based on what had happened during the blip and with Ronan and what have you, the history that we don't really see. We wanted to sort of dial him down and not have him be as polished as he was in the Daredevil series. Plus, through the entire shooting, I don't know that I still am very clear on how, if it is, the same universe as, I don't know.
It's a multiverse now. So.
Yeah, it's a multiverse. So I mean, maybe it's a different version of that character. I don't know. It was not made clear to me as we were going, but there were certainly things that we brought from the Daredevil series. His cufflinks that were important from that show that he stole from his father. We recreated for him for Hawkeye, because it was an important character point for Vincent, and it later in reshoots became a thing that Kate uses to sort of take him down at the end of the show. But we were looking at references in comic books, the Hawaiian shirt being the main one, that were a little seedier for him and a little less polished.
Yeah. Well, lastly, is there any detail in any costume that you put in, like an Easter egg, that you think fans haven't noticed yet?
I don't know. They're pretty good at finding them.
Like, yeah. So nothing. I know there's like that Black Widow thing on Florence's coat. Yeah.
There's a little spider on one of her coats. Trying to think.
Just any sly reference to anything at all?
No, I mean, we did throw in the OG Hawkeye costume in the LARPer scene, but I think that's been spotted and trying to think if there's anything else. I know, not that I can think of. I think
They're
everything
just too good. They're
is
too
spotted.
on it. So
Yeah,
they
yeah,
already they already found it all.
they know it all.
All right. Well, Michael, it was great speaking with you. Thanks so much for your time and have a great day.
Thank you very much.